having a movie where your protagonist literally can't move for, I would say, for 45, 50 minutes of your runtime. How do you keep a movie moving along when your character literally can't? The movie was originally so much heavier with dialogue. That's the other thing about editing. You have to get rid of things sometimes. And sometimes they're great things. And that's one of the harder things about a movie like this is making sure that you're holding long enough that the information penetrates. But you also don't want to live in it too long, because then you're making a slow movie. You can't have produced by Sam Raimi at the front of a movie and then everyone's just like checking out 20 minutes in. That's not going to happen.
Hey, everybody, I'm Josh Apter, filling in for Gordon Burkell. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify their skill set. And you can learn more at filmmakeru.com. That's filmmaker with the letter U. And follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_U. And if I couldn't make it more difficult for you, I just did. Every week, we interview a working film professional. This week, we're joined by Josh Ethier, originally from Rhode Island. He is a renowned Los Angeles-based film editor who's left a strong mark, I know from watching this film that we're going to talk about today, on the horror, thriller, and action genres, literally wearing his passion for the genres on his sleeve, which we will see later. I'm sure you have an idea what that might be. His works have premiered at the esteemed film festivals like Toronto, Sundance, South by Southwest, Tribeca, Beyond, and Fantastic Fest. Recently made a member of American Cinema Editors, so congratulations. And we're going to get to talking about how you got started and about the film that I am watching now that has me freaked out, almost like the first time I saw The Hitcher. I remember, maybe that's one of the movies you were talking about, like in the 90s, because I think that's when was that an 80s?
Love The Hitcher. I love The Hitcher. Yeah, no, it's exactly that. It's like you walk yourself into one situation and it keeps multiplying and stepping further and further, and you wonder, like, wow, like how long is this rubber band going to stretch before it finally snaps? And
or Jennifer Jason Leigh's arms, maybe. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get started with how you got started, because you didn't just hop into that editing suite you're in right now as a full-fledged editor. So what was the sort of interest, the spark of the interest, and how did you get from, hey, maybe I'll do this, to, doing it so successfully now?
Originally I started making films in the backyard with my friends. I grew up in Coventry, Rhode Island, a really small town. And there was another friend of mine from there called Joe Begas. And him and we would just hang out on the weekends, crash at each other's houses, make a ghost movie or like a kung fu movie, or whatever we had seen in theaters that week, whatever we wanted to experiment with and try to make. And we had another friend of ours, a good friend of mine named Steve, who was into makeup effects. He like built a small like oven in his bedroom so he could like bake prosthetics and make masks and casts and everything. And then like slowly over time, it boiled down to just being Joe and I were the last ones that were interested in doing this and making the free time to do it. So when I was 21, I moved to LA. I was a bouncer, big surprise, I know, for about 2 years while I was looking for some sort of way into the industry. I found one. I worked for an editor by the name of Ed Marks. I was an assistant editor for him for about year and a half, 2 years, on everything from reality TV to horror films to webisodes to short films, like whatever came across, he would take everything. Ed was a crazy workhorse, and I was part of the fuel that kept him going as an assistant. I remember like sleeping on the hardwood floor of the assistant room in the back of his house, and then driving down to Temecula with an HD cam tape for like some hunting reality series back, God, almost a decade ago now. And then, my buddy and I, Joe, who at the time was working for Stuart Gordon, a very renowned horror director, we decided, let's pool our money together and let's go make a film. And we did. We made a film called Almost Human, which premiered at Toronto Midnight Madness. That's it. From there, I just met other filmmakers. They were like, hey, I like this guy. I feel like I could sit in a room with him and hang out for 8 to 10 weeks. So I started getting more gigs to cut, and I'm very lucky. I'm only like 37. I've been able to join American Cinema Editors. I've got about 24, 25 features behind me. So yeah, it's just been a wild ride, and I just keep pushing it forward as far as I can.
That's great. Now you were in Almost Human, correct?
I was, yeah. I was Mark, the titular Almost Human guy.
Uh-huh.
which was a lot of fun. Which is funny because that all started because when we were kids and Joe and I were making films, it's like I never really wanted to be an actor. I was
Mhm.
just like the biggest, the scariest looking member of the group. And also because, like I said, everyone else started sort of like petering out and like, being interested in other things.
Mhm.
Joe and I were the only two ones, and he was the guy who had to hold the camera. So I became
Right.
the guy in front of him with, either a Jason mask on or, pulling guys out of cars and, getting into fist fights. So we
Mhm.
just continued that all the way up to Almost Human, where it was like, the film had to be non-SAG. We made that movie for less than $50,000, and premiered at TIFF, which was huge for us.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so we had it was like, well, Josh, I guess you have to do that one more time, but this time you got to do it for like 3.5 weeks.
Jeez. Well, I bring it up because we've at I run Manhattan Edit Workshop, which is also part of Filmmaker U, but in a 6-week editing workshop that we do, which is really like a boot camp to start a career, a lot of people come in with backgrounds in acting, and their sense of rhythm and timing to cut performance is noticeable. Like there's, and I don't know if that translates the kind of acting that you were doing, maybe isn't the same kind, but like there is a relationship, like experiencing the world as an actor and then sort of re-experiencing it as someone evaluating someone else's performance. I just wonder if you thought there was anything to that, or if you were just like ripping people's arms off and it was just you having fun.
Well, I mean, I was having a lot of fun just ripping people's arm off and throwing people around and doing that. But 100% right. There were dialogue sequences in that movie where, like, I'm not a good actor. I mean, I'm an actor. I've done it, but I'm not a good actor. So I would catch myself in a moment like, oh, that was bad. That was bad. And I would just sort of say like, I'm just gonna walk it back, and I'd step it back like 2 or 3 lines, and like it was like clear, like, oh, okay, well, like you're already sort of it was clear that acting wasn't going to be the forefront. It was clear that I was already thinking about the edit, but in that way, I think I actually did okay. I did okay, especially with
Mhm.
the other local actors that we had in that movie, for the sequences where I had to be somewhat emotional or somewhat threatening. Because of that, keeping it in mind, the edit in mind, I knew that I feel like I did all right with it.
No, I mean, it's interesting to be in sort of in the world of it while it's being shot. Not editors aren't always, on set or a location, but to be part of the production where you're saying, all right, we have that, or like I need to go and redo this line. That's not. I'm going to be looking at that in a couple of weeks and just cursing myself for not doing it again. But just knowing that you're like, all right, well, I've got the pieces. Just even if you're not 100% sure how it's going to come together, knowing because you're there that you actually have the building blocks to have options and coverage, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, I mean, I guess that's an advantage. Or were you in your head as an actor, not really,
No, no, I was totally concerned. I was totally concerned with what we needed for the edit, on that one. And actually, Joe and I have continued to make films. It's like the one chance I get to still do like any sort of producing work, because my main focus is just editorial. Like I love
Mhm.
editing films, but I still produce with Joe and then also cut his films. So when I'm on set, the main focus is like, okay, cool. Let me go file all the paperwork, make sure that all the safety, material data sheets are filed and SAG knows everything and we've done all this, we've done all that. And then my next job is to go down on set and be like, cool, so you're going to shoot here, 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 there. If you could just
Mhm.
pick this up for me, this would be great because I know the way you're going to shoot that sequence. So if you just get this, I know I can connect those two pieces. So I
Mhm.
still do that to this day. Just sort of like popping in on the edit on set. And
Mhm.
I agree that a lot of editors, they like to stay away from it. They like to retain their distance and all that stuff. But honestly, I've never had a problem even if I loved something on set, when I get into the
Mhm.
editing room, if it's crap, it's crap, and I'm like, well, that's crap. We don't do it. It's like
Right.
now it's clear to me. I've set different sets of eyes for different situations. It's not like anything is burned into my head like the sort of like the phenomenon of temp love, where like directors become obsessed with temp music and then the composer
Mhm.
hates them for it. Same thing. It's like I don't get obsessed with a shot on set and then demand that it be in the edit. So.
I sort of got into VFX by accident. I always had a technical interest in photography and especially as it relates to movie making. There's something magical about the ability to believe something is happening when it isn't. So I went as a live action producer into a company called Bob Abel and Associates. Then I would have to, have a meeting about how do we do this effect that's in this commercial, and I never got the straight answer I was looking for. I have camera knowledge, so it's like, since it's kind of ambiguous, why don't I just grab a camera and we'll try it out? You have to figure out what tells the story and use every trick in the book to solve your problem. I am Rob Legato, and this is my course on visual effects.
Well, there's also people, I've known editors who they don't want them, the people not to be characters. They don't want them to be actors with all their real drama and all their things that are going on. They just want them to be the characters they're playing. And if they're on set or location, there's something it's just the illusion's blown. And if they can keep that sort of that weird bubble, right, where it's just like this piece of fiction, these people are these characters they're playing, and not bring any, I mean, it's not always baggage, but bring any other context to it. They like to, although, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, right? It's like,
yeah, I mean, I feel like if you can disassociate those two things, and you can say like I worked on a movie with Adrian Brody, where he had to do some sort of questionable things in the film, and I got to meet him and I got to hang out with him, and he's just like a super lovely, wonderful guy, and it never stopped me from having him do terrible things in that movie. So it's like, you just gotta understand the job, I think, and if you can retain some sort of emotional distance, if not physical distance, then that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and I think also as an editor, like being, the footage is the footage. Like you have to be, the objective is not the right word, but you have to see it for what it is, regardless of whether a family member's in it or Adrian Brody or anything. I mean, like the work is the work, and
absolutely, yeah. And also, set is not footage. Set is set. They are two completely different things. So. I've, at least in my capacity, been able to maintain a distance. I know for some people it's not. And also, that's totally valid for those people. I totally understand. Me personally, I haven't had an issue. I like going on set, because going on set is like, it's funny. The editing room is, for me, it's a very exciting place. For a lot of people, it's a very boring place because it's just a room with me in it. So, but going on set is always much more exciting. You get to meet people and, see different crafts at work. So I like being on set. I like meeting people and visiting and saying hello to people and being introduced to folks and talking to sound guys and talking to camera guys. Like, it's very exciting. But yeah, I just keep an emotional distance, and I'm totally fine.
That's great. Have you ever had to, who was telling me, I mean, this was an old story, but like working with an actor next to them, like having to cut the performance of the lead with the lead sitting there, and like what pressure that was. Like it was just impossible.
I don't think so. I think I'm the only lead that I've ever had to cut.
And what a diva you were, right?
I know. I cut out most of my stuff, I was terrible. I was ruthless to myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have to be. So I don't want to jump right to Don't Move, but we should be talking about it because it's the sort of the focus of what we're, what we're talking about today. But, that's a pretty decent trajectory from, this early film to here. So talk a little bit about how you sort of built up from success at Toronto to like this career that keeps going. And then, also, do you feel like, have you done a good variety of things, or are you in your lane and that's where you want to be? Right. Because it seems like you are, pretty solidly in this sort of genre, but I mean, I don't want to have your entire IMDb out. You could have like a period drama in there somewhere for all I know, but
no, but I wouldn't turn it down though. I wouldn't turn it down. No, I feel like because our first film was such a splattery, practical effects driven horror film, that was clearly, we were like 24-year-old kids. We were aping John Carpenter. We were aping Cronenberg. We were just trying to put all that stuff that we really loved on screen. Because of that, and because Joe and I grew up together, so we learned how to sell a gag. We learned how to sell those arms ripping off, for instance. And because of that, I think a lot of the early connections I made were horror related and genre related. I went from that to another film that was around the same size called Contracted. It was like a gross out sort of zombie STD movie, which also did pretty well on Netflix as well. And from there worked on everything from like ghost movies to more zombies to all kinds of stuff. But my interest is always in like a great story. I would be perfectly happy to cut a period drama, or like, hey, if a rom-com had a great script and like great actors, that would be so much fun to cut. because I enjoy all those kinds of movies. I'm just a person that loves going and sitting at the theater and watching a film. So if there was opportunity for those kinds of things, I'd be happy to. The few times I've been able to step out of like specifically that just horror world into more action or thriller territory, like Don't Move or like the film behind me, The Standoff at Sparrow Creek, I've been super excited and I've relished in those experiences because really it's about, anyone can cut a car crash. They're very fun to cut. I love it.
Mhm.
But it's far more interesting to learn how to like weave through dialogue and try to make sure like you hit your correct points for the beat to continue. Like how fast are we moving? Should we move slower? All that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
it's I would love to work on anything. I'd love to. I've done some stuff that leans into comedy. It's a great time. Unfortunately, as an editor, or I'm sure as most department heads, I'm sure you run into the situation where people go, "Well, he hasn't done like a lot of comedy," and it's like, well, yes, because I haven't done a lot of comedy, so I'd love to work on one. So you're always trying to like push against that if you can. But I find that as my resume gets a little bit longer, that stuff becomes less and less an issue. But of course, I still love working on horror films. I'm working on one right now. I've been working on them all year. So it's really just a matter of like what's a good script. I'd love to work on a drama. I'd love to work on like a $2 million indie drama that was just like a coming of age movie, something we haven't seen before. That'd be great.
Yeah, and I think a common misconception is that if you don't already have it on your reel, you're incapable of doing it. And it's just it's like a shame that people don't understand that you're servicing the work. It's not like because you've done, you're not doing that genre because you bring that genre with you wherever you go. It's because that's what it calls
Exactly.
for. And if you were doing a funny, like a good rom-com, you would sort of channel the energy of that and cut it and sort of like with the pace and the style that honors the work. The
Yeah.
worst thing I ever said in an interview was like, the movie usually tells me how it wants to be cut. And they're like, how would you cut this movie? And I'm like, well, you look at the footage, it kind of speaks to you. It tells you how it wants to be cut. And they were like, all right, well, when you've sobered up, why don't you come back? And it's like, they just thought that was like craziest thing anyone could ever say, but it's kind
I
of
mean,
true.
this is total truth, though. Every film has its own voice. I worked
Mhm.
on stuff that was like, I once had this incredible interview. I wish it was in the print version. I think it was Variety, and it was a movie that I worked on called Bliss, which is a vampire movie that my friend Joe and I did. We shot it, stole the entire film on the streets of LA, shot Super 16. It's incredibly violent, dingy, dirty, drug and sex filled. Like it's a total exploitation film. And the review was Bliss is 80 minutes of nudity, screaming, and violence cut together with the deafness of a chainsaw. And I thought that was the most positive review of that film that I could have ever hoped for.
Mhm.
But of course, it was like a splat review on Rotten Tomatoes. But I was like, that's the point. Like, that's what it is. So I've worked on films like that, but I've also worked on films like Oz Perkins' Gretel and Hansel, which is all about atmosphere, slow moving cameras, breathy takes between actors, living in singles, living in masters,
Mhm.
doing a lot with sound design and music as opposed to forcing things through an edit. So it's true. There's just every film speaks for itself. Every movie has a different voice. You just have to. A part of our job is to help find it. Same as the director of photography, same as the production
Mhm.
designer. The director's just sort of pushing us along through all of it, trying to find that specific voice of the film.
Yeah, well, which is a good segue to Don't Move, because I do think there's a lot of atmosphere in this movie. So, reading your bio, I'm expecting Splatterfest, and what I'm getting is like, gosh, I don't think there was a line of dialogue. I wrote it down. It's not for the first 6 minutes. You're just telling me a story visually. I know everything about her until that guy starts talking. Right, his name's Robert at that point. Um,
Richard, yeah.
Richard. So, like, I see a lot of visual cues, like her perspective, laying in bed of the curtains. Like it's like you're giving me some visual cues as to like how we're going to see the world, whose perspective we're seeing it through, what's happened to her, and where she is in her head, and all of this without a word of dialogue. And
Yeah.
then it's like a lot of this movie is doing the work without talking. Granted, I mean, there are plenty of dialogue sequences, but there's also a lot of nonverbal storytelling in this thing. And that's really like, I don't know if it's like, oh, we don't see that a lot these days, but like, it just sort of, you watch enough stuff on these streaming networks and it's just like everybody's talking all the time. I really appreciated that about this, was that it really, it sort of took its time, and it was just an efficient and significant way of giving you information that's going to be like, I know the boat's coming back, right? Like, I don't know how yet, but I know it's coming back. I knew when the woman was like looking at the truck pulling out of the gas station that she was writing down the plate and that was going to come back. I'm fairly certain that the screwdriver in the glove compartment's coming back. Like, there's the real efficiency of assembly here, right? Like, and that's great when you're saying like, look, this is in here for, what is it? It's like, what did they say? At Pixar, they had that big sign on the wall that was just like, eat the whole cow or something, like use the whole, like, it's just like, don't waste anything. Right.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a lot in here that you're putting to use, not a lot that you're putting to waste.
No, absolutely. The movie was filled with those little details, like the boat, and we try to make sure that like whenever he ties her hands, whenever he does anything specific to her, we make sure to show you that nice and close. Not forever, but just quick enough to register a couple of details, so that as it then unfolds, you sort of have all the information you need. And that's one of the harder things about a movie like this is making sure that you're holding long enough that the information penetrates, but you also don't want to live in it too long, because then you're making a slow movie, and you can't have produced by Sam Raimi at the front of a movie and then everyone's just like checking out 20 minutes in. That's not going to happen.
Right.
So it was a huge balance between those little details and how long they needed, and what sort of things to like say, and this can totally go the wrong way and you start hitting everything, but like, should we hit this thing with a boom? Do we need to like underline that for the audience, or like, is there a little music swell here, or a little change or something? Which was huge in the car sequence that I'm sure you saw after the opening title, where she's first, zip tied in the back of a car. And we start unraveling things, and we remember like, oh, that's right, she has that pocket knife, and he didn't check her for anything because he wasn't all that stuff starts to make sense. Because Richard or Andrew, whatever name he goes by, he's not a professional. He's just a guy who's done this a number of times. But you also have to understand, like, he might have gotten lucky with certain things, and Iris is the challenge he's been waiting for, which makes for a very interesting movie. And it's funny to mention that there's all these like dialogue free moments, is because the movie was originally so much heavier with dialogue. There was in that opening sequence where she's on the cliff. Originally, Richard was supposed to badger her, like to keep asking and to seem very aloof and sort of like really obviously play dumb. And that was meant to sort of like disarm her. And then she sort of like goes off on him a couple times, very frustrated. And then she reluctantly gives up her story. And then at the end of her story, he says something that loses her again. And she just sort of like huffs and puffs and looks away. And then Richard tells his story and tries to win her back. And the whole time that we were working through that sequence, every single pass of the film, we were like, this feels inauthentic to have her like give in to him. It's like, and you didn't want to have a movie where it's like a woman walking in the woods and suddenly gives up her whole life story to some stranger. Because I'm sure any woman will tell you that's the last thing they want to do when they meet a strange man in the woods. So it was like, we need to find a better way into this. And so I had this idea of restructuring it so that whenever he asks her those dumb, aloof questions, instead of underlining that he seems a bit dumb and aloof, just have her play it like she's just breathing. She's just waiting for this to end. She's not even going to give her attention or her focus to this thing, which then we moved up him opening up. So he gives his story first. He gives her something to hold on to get some sort of an emotional response for. And after he finishes his story, he doesn't ask for it. We have that great shot of her just sort of like looking away and taking a breath. And then she starts her story. Like, it's her choice. It was her choice to give that information up. She made the decision to open up to both Richard and to the audience, because like you said, we've seen so many things in that first 6 minutes, but you don't know all of the intricate details until she gives them to you. So it's just about balancing that sort of mystery box of like, what do we know about her? How much do we need to know right now? But how much do we need to know at the end of the scene? And sort of like whittling it down on both ends. And then to your point, like, if, the movie was originally a bit longer, like probably 15, 20 minutes. And so as we're whittling it down, you're sort of buying time in a way. because now when you inject a bit of silence into that opening sequence, you're really connecting with the two of them. You're seeing both the actors like really do the work and just letting the actors do it. I don't need to do anything. Those actors are fantastic. Finn Wittrock, Kelsey Asbill, they're incredible. So I could watch single takes of them and just be just as riveted. So just letting them do the work and letting the wind, the sound of the trees below her on that cliff, things like that, just like fill the space with a bit of weight. And that was then something that we carried throughout the whole film. We did it again in the second act at Bill's house. Originally, there was a lot more dialogue between Bill, the old widower, and Richard, because Richard was trying to suss out, is she here? And Bill originally had a whole much bigger, longer story about his wife. And it connected with Iris's story. And so it was like cutting between her in the her underneath the couch and Bill sitting in the chair, and as he's telling the story, instead of it being like he's telling it to Richard, we had it set up like he's telling it to Iris. And all of the responses of like, him getting over his grief and her sort of like mirroring her own story with that. But the problem is that sequence had this big emotional beat in the middle, but on either side was just like a thrilling setup. And so I fought for that scene the entire time we were editing. I was like, no, I love that exchange. It mirrors her story. It parallels her story. She even had like a small tear come out of her eye when he got to the part about how even though his wife died, he just keeps on getting up every day for her. And like all that stuff. And it was the last thing to go. And I have to say, it's also the thing that made the scene finally just like beautifully sing across. And it's like, that's the other thing about editing, is like learning how to kill your darlings. Like you have to get rid of things sometimes, and sometimes they're great things. There's that great story. It's Walter Murch and Philip Kaufman, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. There was like this one scene in the middle that sort of like stopped everything, and they didn't, they couldn't figure it out. And Walter Murch was finally like, we just got to pull this one scene out. And as they're getting ready to cut the film strip out on the Moviola, Phil Kaufman just said, when I read this scene in the script, I knew that I could make this movie. And Walter Murch just sits there and he goes, shh, shh, and pulled it out. And it's like, it served its purpose. It's the scene that brought you to this film, and now it has to go. It served its purpose. So that whole Bill sequence was my favorite thing in the script. I loved that scene. I loved the idea of handing off a movie to a different character halfway through. What a surprising, cool twist for and only for the second act, not even for a third act. Just like a cool midsection of the film is like, this guy has to defend Iris, but he doesn't know anything about her because she can't talk. She can't talk, she can't move, she can't signal anything. And so he just has to use his own morals, his own ethics to be like, I'm going to try to help this woman and try to figure out what the hell is going on with this guy that just showed up at my house. So it was such an interesting setup. So that was one that I was really excited to work on, and one that by the end of it, I feel like we absolutely ended up with the best version. And it's my favorite, 20-minute chunk of the movie is that whole section of Bill's house.
Yeah, he almost falls for it, and there's this really subtle move where it's like, oh shit, he's a bad guy. And it's not like, it's crafty in how sort of low key it is. It's funny when you say when it's got like Raimi's name on it, you sort of expect it to be, boisterous and visceral and
not to be too much, but everyone's kind of waiting for the turkey baster moment too, because you've got the don't at the front of the title. So
well, he did A Simple Plan, right?
He did. Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah. So I just shut me up. I mean, he's definitely got the touch. He can do anything. So I'm not but maybe the audience expectation off of his name would be something.
No, absolutely. Not everyone is going to remember oh, that's right, he made a crazy good, quiet Coen-y thriller in 1996. So but I love A Simple Plan. Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. You also I was just listening to this thing about the Silence of the Lambs, and apparently William Goldman had it's like this scene needs to go. It was like Clarice's mentor having this longer conversation where it sort of goes deeper into this relationship that you're kind of like, are they, because you watch it and there's a little bit of omitted material, but it liberated the movie. It just and it was this incredibly important scene for everybody during the entire process. And it was someone like William Goldman noticed that it should go, or that he was like, I think maybe this might not work. And they were like, and it ended up, just sort of you never know. Right. And you hear these stories all the time. It wasn't the scene. It was something that happened 10 minutes before the scene or after. Like it's like all these sort of like adjustments affect other adjustments, and it's like the
Yeah.
thing is a ripple effect.
The
Um,
whole thing is like thinking about it like again, not to pull again from Walter Murch, but he was saying like, if my fingers and my hand are hurting, it's the quack that operates on my hand because the problem is probably in my shoulder, or maybe it's in my tricep, or it's in my elbow. You have to understand like things get affected all the way through.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. He gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now. Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
the obstacles you're putting in the places of them are really so strong that I'm like, well, this movie's going to end because he's not going to let this happen to her. And so it like, and then there's a lot of things like that where she's really smart and she's feeling her fingers coming back and she's going to try to communicate with the people at the gas station and unbuckle her belt and the number. Like it's just, there's a lot of really interesting rhythms in this movie.
Yeah, the Richard's frustration and his imperfectness as a killer is, or as an abductor, whatever he is, for the runtime of the film. But his imperfectness is what makes that character so interesting. Seeing him frustrated, seeing him make mistakes, seeing her, even though she can't move, even though she can't run, even though whatever, she can't necessarily fight back at certain points, she keeps getting these little one-ups on him, as well does the cop, which you'll see, as well does Bill and everything like that. And it's really by sheer luck and tenacity that he keeps this thing going, like he keeps this thread alive. And I think that and also for Finn, that's such an incredible way into the character, is to not be like the killer and with the black glove who's always off screen. It's like, no, you are actually a focal point of character development in this film. Like, this is just as much your story as it is Iris's, of course. It's her, she's the lead and she's the one. But there's so many different layers and shades to his performance. And I think that makes it so interesting. Seeing him have to adjust on the fly makes it so much more interesting. When you were talking about The Hitcher, it's like, it's a perfect example how Rutger Hauer keeps just showing back up and doing something a little bit more. Or the other example that I love for Finn's character Richard is The Vanishing, the original Vanishing, where you watch the killer learn how to do the thing that he's going to end up doing, and at one point he even accidentally chloroforms himself. And it's just you see these almost sort of bumbling comedic moments of imperfectness up to knowing, oh, but you did abduct and kill a woman. Or we think you did, because we don't know. No one knows exactly what happened. And the only way that this guy's going to find out is to get in that hole in the ground and let you cover him up. So it's it was just such an interesting, playful thing in the edit too, because we weren't shying away from it. We were trying to make things difficult for Richard, because the audience is always going to be rooting for Iris. I hope. But it's fun to see Finn in that position, making those decisions and sort of oh, okay, how do I adjust this? And it's a constant struggle the whole time. And I think that's what makes it for a really fun thriller.
Yeah, well, I mean, he gets a call from his daughter and wife, during, he's, while he's kind of finally getting away from the fire. And I just rewatched The Sopranos because I hadn't seen it since it was on, and that episode where he's taking her on college visits, and it's this mixture of this dad with this daughter with this family, that scene sort of immediately brought back how do you juggle or reconcile the fact, and of course not knowing, you're oh, this guy has a whole thing. He's not James Gumb. He's no, I wouldn't say he's Tony Soprano either, but he's real. He's got a real situation.
Yeah. He probably has to be back at work on Monday. So he's got to hurry this up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much enjoying it, all the details, and the efficiency of it. I think it's just I've been noticing that there's no waste here. I'm really Even the
No,
atmospheric stuff from the forest, like when you're over the canopy of trees, a lot of stuff, even it seemed like this weird, like Prius Kubrick Shining joke, where it's like instead of you're winding in this massive, Colorado road, it's just like this little woodsy road with a Prius. But it's like, there's so much going on in here. It's really been a blast to watch.
yeah, we tried to put all of those little details in. We tried not to live in anything too long, and then when we do, it's hopefully because there's a payoff involved with it. But yeah, having a movie where your protagonist literally can't move for, I would say, I'm ballparking here, but 45, 50 minutes of your runtime is insane. Because how do you keep a movie moving along when your character literally can't?
Right.
So it became all about what she was looking at, what she was hearing, trying to, never just her looking at something and then seeing the thing and then just on to something else. It was like, no, make sure we go back to her quickly. And I had to find a small eye twitch or a blink or a movement, something to let you know, like, oh, okay, cool. She saw that. She registered that. That's done. So it was like a delicate balance of that all the way through.
Plus her POV, by the way, like sort of like gooey POV that's sort of it's throbbing to sort of indicate.
Yeah, drugged and affected. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is that that's a post obviously process, but like
actually, what's funny is that I ended up doing that effect. We kept sending it out to like visual effects houses, and things were going way too psychedelic. And we would like keep stepping it back, and people would be like, well, now it's not even really in effect. And we'd like, no, all right. So I ended up just doing it with the directors, like here in the edit suite, of just like fooling around in DaVinci and trying to create that effect.
Wow.
But yeah, that was all calculated to try to like, how do we make sure the audience knows exactly what she's going through, but never to get ahead of her, because you don't want to be ahead of Iris and be waiting for her to do something. You want to be ahead of her and be like, oh, that's right, she can't move. So she's, it's going to take her a minute to unbuckle this seatbelt. But what else could happen in that minute? So you're constantly trying to like use the outside world as well as her inside experience and keep that tension going, keep pulling that rubber band, or Jennifer Jason Leigh's legs, keep it going so that the audience is like, oh man, when is this finally going to snap? Is he going to come to the door? Is Bill going to understand? Is this cop going to pull his gun? Like what is the next thing that's going to happen?
Did you modulate the effect so that it's like when she's super drugged, it's more, and then when it's wearing
I
off?
did like a 4-stage effect that I could step back just using like simple math. Trying to like walk it back. And then also I have to give a huge shout out to our re-recording mixer, Darren Haynes, who is also our sound designer. I take temp sound design very seriously. I try to do absolutely as much as I can in the box, just because I have a background in music and a background in sound. So I enjoy all of that being part of the edit. But everything that I did in any sort of temp way that I was like really proud of and really happy with, it went to Darren, and he just turned it into like cinematic bliss. He 100% upped every single thing that I had done. And I think as a result, it's like, when you're in the editing room and you're putting in all these different, sound effects and music and hits and all this stuff, you're trying to elicit a certain thing, and you just hope upon hope that the collaborators after you are going to enjoy what you've done and push it further. And that was 100% the case in this movie. We had 2 composers, Mark Corvin and Michelle Osis, who did an incredible job. And I instructed them, I was like, don't worry about temp love. We hate it. We absolutely hate it. It doesn't sound like our movie. You guys are our movie. So just like take it and run with it. And there were times where they veered so left of what was in the edit, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And other times where they were like, no, you 100% hit the rhythm of that scene. We're not going to mess with that. We are going to do it in our voice, and we're going to make it better, and we're going to make it part of the whole. But, there was a real collaboration there, and it was just a joy working with everybody in post all the way down in this. And also to the producers, who were just like so supportive of Brian and Adam the entire time. And Brian and Adam themselves, who were just like 2 great friends now, 2 great guys. We had so much fun making this movie. We were like literally like high-fiving. It's ridiculous. Right. That's what all movies should be like.
Well, it kind of shows. I mean, it's weird to say that watching it. It's just like, it doesn't feel difficult in what it is. You know what I mean? Like for the characters, like maybe there's the challenges, but like in terms of it coming together, I was just like, you get the sense you're in good hands pretty immediately. And then you just like, all right, give me that. Like you get washed over by the mood of it. It's like, it's nice. Not everything, like, some of the stuff you watch now is you're just like one episode of of a show and you're just like, nope, sorry. Like I can't go there. Right. This is very, very easy to go where you want me to go.
Yeah, we had like a perfect assembly of humans. We also had our director of photography, Zach Cooperstein, famously who shot Barbarian and did an incredible job on that. And like just his visual storytelling in tune with the directors and the footage coming to me. It's like sometimes when you open up dailies, you see that things have just been kind of sprayed with coverage. And coverage is like, at least in like the art house world, coverage is sort of a dirty word, but I understand its place when you're making things for a larger audience. But Zach's coverage was always so calculated. I could tell right from that first scene on the edge of the cliff how, Richard was always sort of like over Iris and Iris was always alone. It's like the way that it all played, the visual storytelling was like so well tuned and so well done, so beautifully shot, such graceful, elegant camera moves where it's like, I don't need to cut. I don't need to hurry anything along. This is beautiful. I'm just going to live in this for a little bit. We got very lucky with everyone on this movie where it felt like the right people to make this movie who were excited about making a movie like this.
That's great. Now, they say in the bio you wear this all on your sleeve. Did you have the ability to show us?
I do. This is funny because when Almost Human premiered at Toronto, I ended up on like a bunch of tattoo blogs. They're not even great tattoos. I have a lot of.
Oh my
I've got
God.
The Fly there. I've got Halloween. I've got American Werewolf. The Thing is way on the back.
Like
there's
thousands
more.
of dollars worth. It's like $30,000 worth at least of tattoos on your arms,
Oh,
right?
I don't know about that. The trick with tattoos is to become friends with your artist, become drinking buddies with your artist, and you won't have to pay full price.
That's
But
great.
yeah, I think they go all the way up, and I still gotta get more and over. Thankfully, I'm a big guy. I've got a lot of room for tattoos.
Yep.
So.
It's no Post Malone action. Don't touch the
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, there's still.
Well, I mean, maybe I don't know. You know what? Maybe in my 70s I'll get a face tattoo.
Uh-huh.
It'll be like there'll be nobody left above me to be like, you're gonna hate that when you're older. It's like, well, I'm older now. Leave me alone.
Yeah. No, you never know. My son is getting a couple now, and it's like, go for it. You know what? Go. If it makes you happy, you know what I mean? I just like he has no money, so he's become friends with a tattoo artist.
Well, there you go. When I was coming up and I was working for that editor, Ed Marks, I asked him the first day, because I was working. I mean, I worked for free on a feature film for about 6 months, doing 10-hour days, 6 days a week. That's how committed I was. Like, I want to be in this industry doing this one thing. And so the first day that I went in, of course, I'm in, short sleeves, jeans, and I was like, hey, do you want me to cover these up? Like, if you ever just want me to, not look like a dirtbag hanging around your house. And he was like, no, get more, get pierced, go nuts, just be like a personality. And like, he's entirely right. It's like a lot of the people that I've worked with have been like, oh no, like I feel like I could hang out with you. A lot of people that met me at film festivals would, before they would ever consider hiring me for a movie, they were like having beers with me at the Alamo Drafthouse, and they were like, I like this guy, I could probably hang out with this guy. So I think that any sort of personal expression that people can get out there, I think it's wonderful.
Right. Well, you bring up a good point, which being an editor is obviously there's a skill, there's a passion, a talent, but also, and I don't want to reduce it to being a good hang, but it's an intense period of time. You don't.
Yeah, I mean, you're also part of someone.
Yeah, exactly. And also, yeah, exactly. You and defender also, like if you want to help argue a point with some people who maybe don't agree with you, or like it's just there's a comradeship, whatever that word is, that exists. It's a beautiful relationship between director and editor, at least in features. And there's nothing because like you are really like. I mean, look, there is sound design, there's color correction, there's score, there's these things that add this extra dimension once the work that you've done is complete. But what you're doing is you're fixing all the problems. You're bringing the greatest possible thing out of what you've been given, but it's not going to be something else when you're done, right? It's a script. It's something else when it's shot, right? Like it's like there's so many like iterations it goes through. It can completely change, but not this one. This is the one where it's like, when you're done, it is the thing that it is. And that's an intense place to share with someone, right? Like as that's coming together. So, I mean, it can be very like high fives, like you're saying, but it's a pretty intense place to be. So
Yeah, I mean, you have to hope that one, you end up with a director who likes the editing room. I've worked with a lot of directors who didn't want to go in. They just saw it as like, oh, that's like a technical thing. I don't necessarily have to be there, which was very strange to me. But these guys, they were here every day. And what was also what's funny is working with a directing duo. I was wondering, I was like, oh, is it like good cop, bad cop? Or are they both like one mind? Are they like, because they've also, so Joe and I have been friends for a long time, made a lot of films. Brian and Adam have been friends, I believe, since high school. And made all of their films together as a directing duo. So I was like, what am I walking into? It's like, and what it ended up being was that they are both completely wonderful and completely different. Like one of them would have to like he would be so happy to move on in the edit, but he'd have to go home and watch it 200 times. Like while he was eating dinner, he'd have his phone and he would watch the scene 200 times. And the other guy was like, I got to drill it in the editing room, but I don't want to talk about it for 2 months. I'll talk about it next time we watch the movie. But he would like live in the room on that day. So watching them, I was like very often I was a tiebreaker. And usually I could get one of them to agree with me. But I would say that by the end of it, the three of us were we were perfectly operating on the same wavelength, where it was really just having a great time by the end of the film. And then it was like moving into post. It's that role you're talking about as a supporter, keep me on the emails. Let me see what's happening with sound. Let me see what's happening with picture. Let me weigh in on visual effects. Let me make sure that all those conversations we had in the editing room are being followed through. And it was a blast to do, and I was happy to do it. These guys are fantastic. I hope I get to work with them again and soon. And thankfully, with their movie being picked up by Netflix, I'm sure Netflix is asking them right now, what do you guys want to do?
I wish it and you guys the best of luck. I mean, it seems like good things are like, you know what I mean? The whole process seems to want to result in something that's appreciated and seen and well liked.
It's the kind of movie that a lot of people in Hollywood are wishing was being made more often. That mid-range sort of like, $5 to $15 million movie.
I mean, the whole industry is completely up in the air, right? It's like this may be the kind of the next move in the sense that, no one knows what the hell is going on right now. So, the fact that this is unless a celebrity is about to appear that I don't know about, this is like these are relatively unknown actors, and the story is doing the work, right? So, I'd like to see that. The independent filmmaker in me would love to see many, many more of these types of movies out.
I'd be very happy to work on films like this until I'm, old and grayer. I think this is the kind of thing that gets me excited about making movies, is fun movies like this.
That's terrific. Well, one question I know Gordon asks everybody at the end of these interviews is sort of a guilty pleasure movie or show or something that's like, maybe if you're blocked up, you can just watch it and just get inspired. But like anything that comes to mind, that's just like, that's my desert island movie.
Oh, well, actually, this is beautiful because it ties in wonderfully because there's a new restoration of it, which is funny because like you were saying, like really quickly how, you're a horror guy. You clearly work in horror all the time. And like, but my one true passionate love in this world is like incredibly slow, atmospheric Eastern European cinema. Like I love Tarkovsky, I love Bergman, I love Bela Tarr, Andrzej Wajda, and one of my favorite movies ever is actually being restored by Kino Lorber right now, which is Tarkovsky's final movie, The Sacrifice, which he shot in Sweden with most of Bergman guys, Sven Nykvist and all those, his whole crew, production designer and everything. And I can zone into that movie and just immediately be transported and connected and understand that time is so different. Sometimes I work on projects, I think like, oh, I got to keep cutting. And, it's like a sort of pattern you get into. And then I can watch a movie like that and go, or just don't cut. Just let everything just gather weight and envelop you. So that is for sure one of my desert island movies. If I ever crash on a desert island, I hope it's with a copy of The Sacrifice.
And a projector and a screen and theater seats.
Don't tell Chris Nolan, but if it has to be an Apple Watch, I'll watch it on an Apple Watch.
Oh my God! David Lynch was the first person to bitch about watching movies on your phones,
And you know
It's
what? I went to a screening. I went to a screening of I think it was Wild at Heart at the New Beverly. Surprise intro from David Lynch, and he had softened so much. And he said, "I remember I said that video was the end of everything, but you know what? I was an idiot. Go make a fucking movie. Make it however you can." And like he was just totally reversed on the whole thing. He's like,
Yeah.
"Go make it. It's too much fun. We should all be making art." You know, I was like, "Yeah, exactly. You're right."
So, Josh, thank you so much for your time. I hope
Thank
I
you
didn't
so
take
much for
too much
having
of
me.
your day. Yeah, that was great. We'll love to have you back if and when you're doing stuff that you want to talk about. We're always here and always excited to have a conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, that's it for this week. Thanks again for watching. You can check us out at filmmakeru.com. That's filmmakeru.com. Follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I am Josh Apter. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day.